a bunch of cancellations are happening right now. You don't want that. That's why it's important to get to the close. It doesn't matter that you're under contract. You have to close. That's what's important right now. You're tuned in to Build Your Business with Brittany, the spot for real-world tactics and cutting-edge tools that actually get results. I'm Brittany Handura, real estate agent, coach, and investor, and I'm here to help you work less and earn more and crush your goals. So let's go. All right, let's keep going. We're talking about writing a contract that closes. Now we're jumping into the RPA. Mastering the residential purchase agreement so that your offers get accepted and actually close. This is what I want for you. In competitive markets, offers with clean terms are 34% more likely to be accepted over similar priced offers. What this means is that basically you're saying, you're not putting a bunch of crazy things in there. You're not saying, I want the termites done. I want to have a clean inspection. I want to have clear title, all of this kind of stuff. Most of this, first of all, is already built into the contract, so you don't have to worry about that. But you want to make sure that you are streamlining your offer. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, how to make it a clean offer, because we don't want to confuse it and make it too confusing. Especially when it comes to right now, we're asking for seller credits and asking for price reductions and things like that. We want to make sure that we're making it clean and that we're using language that they know you're not a brand new agent, or at least you're not what they think of as a brand new agent. 20% of failed escrows are due to poorly written contracts or missed deadlines. And basically the reason for that is there's just the expectations are not met in some way or another. The missed deadlines are a big thing because sellers already are feeling slighted that they have to reduce their price or offer a compensation or concession or something like that. So if the deadlines are missed by the buyers, that gives them fodder to say, nope, just cancel the deal. I don't even want to continue with this, just cancel it. And remember, a bunch of cancellations are happening right now. You don't want that. That's why it's important to get to the close. It doesn't matter that you're under contract. You have to close. That's what's important right now. Experienced listing agents can spot a, quote, rookie RPA in seconds. And sellers are 60% more likely to choose an offer that inspires confidence in the buyer's agent. This is so true. I can definitely spot a, quote, rookie RPA, because let me tell you, when I was a brand new agent, I was putting in the weirdest things and I was sending it to my mentor and they were just like, yep, it's filled out correctly. They were not trying to say, like I was trying to say, here's what I want to come across. And they were just like, yep, you filled it out right. What I wanted was the strategy. That's what I was trying to get at. I wanted to understand, here's what I'm trying to get across. How do I write this contract in a way that gets that across? And so we want to make sure that we're not filling that out as a, quote, rookie. I don't want you guys to be thought of by that, because those agents are going to choose a more seasoned agent every time. All right, what are your key takeaways from this RPA? Your RPA is your sales pitch. Every clause should reinforce certainty and professionalism. This is your sales pitch, not just with the buyer, but also with the listing agent and the seller. Because just like what we said, if you submit an offer that has mistakes or is written weird or has some weird terms in it, it's going to show that you're not as seasoned as somebody would like to work with. And it makes it so that they're a little uncertain about working with you. We don't want to do that. Same thing as if we're presenting it to the buyer and the buyer has questions and we're like, I don't really know. You know what? I'm not sure about that. We need to understand exactly what it is that we're saying, exactly what it is that we're telling them, because it reinforces certainty and professionalism, which is exactly what we want to exude, right? Know the seller's priorities. Price is only one factor. terms, speed, and certainty can win in even multiple offer situations. This is so important. We talk about this all the time, that one of the main things you need to do to stand apart is to pick up the phone and call the listing agent before you submit an offer. This drives me crazy when I get an offer that is totally like unsolicited. Of course, do I want offers? Yes, we want tons of offers because it really makes it so the seller is in the driver's seat, number one. But how do we make it stand out? We need to talk to that listing agent to say, my client is really excited about this house. How do I get it accepted? What is it that the seller wants? And even if they tell you they just want highest price and quickest close, that will tell you something. And so you can at least, first of all, I would dig into a little deeper and say, what's a quick close? 30 days, 21 days, 10 days. Get them to tell you exactly what a quick close is. Tell them what the highest price is. What is the price that they're going to say yes is a slam dunk? If they tell you they just want full list price, great. If they tell you we have a bunch of other offers in, that's going to tell you what you need to do. You need to make sure that your offer is written higher than what those other offers are. If they tell you there are other offers, you can ask them where those other offers are, even a ballpark. Some agents, especially more veteran agents, are going to say, I can't tell you that. That is not true. That is an old rule from like decades ago. But the new RLAs, they say that you're able to share that information with the buyer's agents. And the reason is because it's, in my opinion, it is more beneficial for your seller to be able to get the highest price. If you have an offer for $50,000 over and you're telling somebody, oh, just write your highest and best, but you could tell them, hey, we have an offer in for $50,000 over. So if you want to get this, you have to write it higher. Now maybe they'll write it higher, and then you can go back to the one that's $50,000 over and say, hey, we had an offer that's even higher. Do you want to up your price? Now that's when that bidding war is going. That's your job. But if you as the agent are like, oh, I can't tell you that, you're not, in my opinion, doing your job to represent the seller well. So that's a hot take. So take it as you will. Especially veteran agents are going to say, they're going to disagree with me. They're going to say, no, you can't tell them. You need to represent your seller. But in my opinion, you're only representing your seller well if you're getting the highest price for them, which is what they want. I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay, triple check the details. Typos, missed signatures, and inconsistent terms kill deals. One of the things that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, and it might be a little Karen of me, is that I can't stand when people don't capitalize the right things. So if you're writing in an address, capitalize the first letter of the street. Spell the names right. Do it so make sure that your grammar is correct. Make sure that you don't have typos. Make sure that you're doing it in a professional way. Because this is one of those things that agents will see that. Like an agent like me, even though I seem so cool and hip, I would be like, ugh, that irks me. I can't stand that. So you have to make sure that you are doing it like being extremely professional. One of the things that if you know me, I am not the details person. I'm big picture. I think big. I think fast. I move quick. And so I always tell the story that when I was writing an offer for myself and my wife, I sent her the offer to look over because she is the details person. And she said, you spelled our last name wrong. And I was like, excuse you, what? No, I did not. And I went and checked. Sure enough, it was spelled wrong. And I was like, wow, if I can do that for even myself, you need to make sure that you are triple checking the details. You don't want to make those kind of mistakes. Now, I will say, making mistakes like that are not the biggest deal in the world because you can always change it with an addendum. If you truly did make a mistake, like you spelled their last name wrong, you can always change that with an addendum and say, here's their correct spelling of their name. But you don't want to do that, especially the typos, because then that just kind of shows you're moving too fast and you're not really checking and you're not, it gives a little bit uncertainty as to will this close. And that is exactly what we want to tell our seller, that yes, it's going to close. We can be confident in this. So triple check. Be proactive on contingencies. Shorten strategically, but never recklessly. This is one thing that I tell a lot of my clients is that, hey, we can shorten the timeline to be a lot of the timelines. We can shorten the appraisal timeline, but we don't want to remove it unless they're paying cash. So being reckless with the timeline is removing that appraisal contingency completely. We don't want to do that unless they're paying cash or unless they have cash in the bank to be able to pay it. Because what you cannot do is you cannot say, well, we have the loan contingency to fall back on. That loan contingency is not going to apply if you say, oh, well, they couldn't get the loan because it didn't appraise. You have to make sure that they still have an appraisal in place if that loan is contingent on the appraisal coming through. If that's over your head, that's okay. Basically, the idea is make sure that you have the appraisal contingency in place. One thing to make sure your clients know about that, though, is that if you have the appraisal contingency in place, you can shorten it, but if they shorten it, sometimes there is an upcharge, like a rush fee. So don't shorten it so much to be like a rush fee, an additional fee. If your buyers don't want to pay for that or can't pay for that, just make sure that you're shortening it appropriately. Don't be reckless. The other one that you can almost always shorten is the inspection contingencies, because you can almost always get in your inspection contingencies. I shorten it usually to within 10 days. The reason for the shortening of it is that I want the seller to know we're going to be on top of this. We're going to get this done. We're going to make it happen quickly. You can shorten the loan contingency. The loan contingency is going to be based on the lender. So if they say, ooh, we can't do it in 21 days, we can't do it in 10 days, we can't do it faster because maybe it's a VA loan, maybe it's a different type of loan. You want to make sure that you're checking with your lender to say, how short can we shorten this? Because the seller wants a shortened escrow. All right, we're going to run through the rest of this. Common agent questions. How do I know what price and terms to offer? First off, it's always the decision of the buyer. But you are advising the buyer. So you want to make sure that you understand what is a good price and terms. First off, we want to have talked to the seller so that we can tell the buyer, here's what the seller is really looking for. So if you really want this house, we want to make sure that we're doing price and terms that the seller is really looking for. Secondly, we want to make sure that the house is in general a good price for the area. So you want to run some comps and you want to say, okay, here's what the comps in the area, especially if you're going to offer lower, you want to be able to justify that with the listing agent. You want to be able to say, hey, I ran some comps and in this area, this is what I'm seeing. So this is why the buyer is offering this. So you want to look at the comps in the area, and then you want to talk to the seller about what are they hoping for with price and terms. Should I ever waive contingencies? We did talk about this, that you absolutely can waive contingencies if you have a cash offer. You don't need a loan or appraisal contingency. And when it was a super hot seller's market, people were even waiving inspection contingencies. I always recommend doing an inspection, even if it's like a pass-fail inspection. So a lot of times for my own offers that I write, like for me personally, I know that it's either going to be a yes, we want to move forward, or no, we don't. But I'm not going to ask for anything. I'm not going to ask for them to fix anything, because I want them to know that the offer that I gave is the offer that we're going to close with. So do we waive inspection contingencies? Only if we are really, really sure. And usually I say, no, keep that inspection contingency in place. How do I write an offer that stands out without overpaying? So in the example that I gave where the listing agent is saying, just write your highest and best, and you have no idea, what you can do is called now I'm blanking on it. It's not an extension, wow, I'm totally blanking on this word. So if you know the word that I'm thinking of, put it in the chat. But where basically you're saying my client is willing to pay this much higher than the next highest offer. I cannot believe I'm blanking on this word right now. I have no idea. Anyway, so you're going to say that they're going to pay, like, so let's say it's $1 million. They're willing to pay 1.1. So you say, okay, they're willing to go $10,000 over the next highest offer up to 1.1. And then, and it has to be a verifiable bona fide offer, and they can prove that by handing you the offer. Now, some people say, I don't like this because you're basically showing your cards. They're willing to pay 1.1. So an agent could say, hey, come and just write this offer so that I can put it up to 1.1. That is not ethical. And so if they get found out about it, that's a big violation, and that could lead to bad things. So in general, we want to trust that the agent is not doing that and saying, okay, great. Like, if we have an offer, this is what you get. I have gotten these accepted because they're willing to pay something that is something that seller is interested in. Now, here's the thing. That's for a strong seller's market when you have no idea what the other offers are. But if it's not a strong seller's market, if you're in a buyer's market, like, which is where we're heading, then the buyer is the one who really has the upper hand in general. You're not having too many multiple offers, but you still don't want to write an offer that is way above asking, but maybe you want to do something that is above asking. So maybe you want to say, we're going to offer you above asking, but we're going to offer you $10,000 above asking, but we're going to ask for a $10,000 seller credit for closing costs. So essentially, you're offering them a full price offer. So it stands out because it looks like it's above, but you're actually going to request that seller, you're going to request the seller concession. I need to eat something. Okay, so this is how we do it. There are a couple of strategies on how to stand out without overpaying. What is the best way to present my buyer's offer to the listing agent? This is a great question because, again, when I was a new agent, I was sending all kinds of weird stuff, and the listing agents were like, what is this? The best way to do it is via email. I have some agents that I know who say, I want to get face-to-face with them. I want to present my offer in person. I would hate that. I've actually never done that before because I think that is awkward and uncomfortable in 2025. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, how do we do this? We are going to send an email of the full bundle. So remember, we're going to jump into the RPA. I know we're going to go a little bit over. Hopefully you guys can hang on with me. But we're going to send the full bundle of the RPA with nothing more. So we're not going to do like extra, the water conservation, blah, 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 market advisor. We're not doing any of that. That is all going to be taken care of once we open escrow. All we're doing is the RPA bundle. And then we're going to send proof of funds, whatever that might look like, whether it's a pre-approval and then proof of the cash that they need to bring. A lot of times if you see that the agent is requesting a DU, that stands for desktop underwriting, we're going to send, that's basically a higher level of a pre-approval. It's basically saying they have been fully vetted, they are going to close. That's a really good thing to ask for in this day and age. You want to make sure you have that. So that DU, if they ask for that, you want to make sure to include that. And in fact, I would include that anyway, because you want to just say that. Now, those are the things that you're going to include. The RPA, the proof of funds, any kind of pre-approval that they have. And you're going to write in the body of the email a little bit about your client, but not too much. Because remember, we don't do buyer letters anymore because that does not get communicated with the seller usually. So we're not saying, oh, my buyer has a great family. They have 2 kids and they would love to move into this neighborhood. Why? Because now that triggers fair housing and you don't want the seller to get in trouble with that. So as the listing agent, you say, we are not going to accept any of that. But as a buyer's agent, I want to let them know as much information I can, personal information, if it's going to get my buyer's offer accepted. So I'm going to write that in the body of the email to the agent. And then the agent can do whatever they want with that information. They can send it on, they can tell them whatever they want. So I am going to write in the body of the email, and then I'm going to write the highlights. I'm going to say it's a great offer, full price offer, like quick close, contingency, whatever. I'm going to highlight what it is. And then I'm going to put all the rest of that in my email. And then I'm going to send them a text or call them and say, hey, it should be in your email. Check it out. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to get this deal done. Easy peasy. Keep it professional and keep it friendly. How do I handle counter offers effectively? Real estate doesn't have to feel overwhelming. My Start with Success course is designed to cut through the noise and get you to closings fast. You'll learn how to attract clients, master your systems, and close with confidence. For a short time, you could grab it at a huge discount. Your business won't grow by accident, so click the link and let's get you started. Well, if you are receiving a counter offer because you're the buyer's agent, what you're going to do is first off, see what it is. We're going to give it direct. We're going to understand what they're asking for. And then we're going to give it to our buyer because they're the ones who need to decide. So if they're asking for your buyer to come up in price, if they're asking for your buyer to adjust the terms, if they've just cleaned it up a little bit, we need to understand that. And then we need to send it on to our buyer to explain it to them. And then we're going to come back and say, okay, now how do you want to counter? You can either accept this as is, or you can send in your preferred price that you want to do, or whatever it is. You can answer whatever this is, you can counter back. So it really is specific to this offer that you're getting, the counter offer that you're getting, and you want to make sure that you're doing it quickly and that you're not putting too much pressure on the listing agent. This is, again, more strategy. You don't want to put too much pressure if it's a seller situation. If it's a buyer market, if it's a buyer's market, then you can put pressure on the listing agent. It really just depends on like who has the advantage here. And so then you can put pressure by shortening the timelines and saying, hey, we want this signed within 24 hours, that kind of thing. But otherwise, the counter offers, you're going back and forth. Usually you don't do more than like 2, maybe 3 counter offers. If it goes back and forth more than that, it's kind of like, oh, is this deal going to get done? I don't know. Let's go to our RPA and we're going to fill this out super duper quick. Where's my RPA? California Residential Purchase Agreement. This is not the RPA, but this is part of what you need to put in your bundle. So we have, remember, we've already filled out Betty Buyer, so this is already here. All of this information is already going to be here. So let's go down to our RPA. This was revised in June of 2025, but there are not very many changes. So this is the latest version. You always want to use the latest version, but don't worry, there's not a lot to change. All right, so our date prepared, we're gonna say today, you have to put this date in, but remember on the signatures, there's gonna be a separate date that you don't write in because that's the date that it is signed. The date prepared though is what you are referencing back for any counteroffers. It'll say, this for any counteroffer, addendum, anything like that. It'll say this document, counteroffer, addendum, whatever, is referencing the California Purchase Agreement dated this date. So it's the date prepared. So just keep that in mind. The property to be acquired, you can put all of this information in from the MLS. And if you go to MLS Connect, I think in any of those that I listed, you could do it through ZipForms, Glide, DocuSign. There's an MLS Connect and you can find it with the MLS number and it populates all of this. It makes it so much easier. So highly recommend. So you're going to put the property, address, information. The APN number is also going to be in the MLS. So if you can't do that MLS Connect, you can do it. Now the seller broker information. The seller, you need to make sure that you put in, and this is something that I see a lot, that this is just not checked. Again, not a huge deal, but this is something that I see. Oh, this is a newer agent who doesn't have their templates updated or something like that. I am with Real Brokerage Technologies. If I had another agent that was with Real, then this would be a dual agency. Even though it's not me representing both of them, my broker is representing both transactions. So you just have to change that to they're representing both the buyer and the seller. It's a dual agency. If that's not the case, we're just gonna change that. I would say most of the time, so for my templates, I'm just gonna have that the seller is being represented by whoever the seller's broker is. And then of course their license number. All of this you can find in the MLS, or hopefully you can do that MLS Connect and it'll do it for you. If this is not filled out, again, that's a key way for me to say, oh, this is not done correctly, and that tells me it's not professionally done. All right, we're gonna fill out the purchase price. You always wanna make sure this is right. So we're gonna say it's $1 million. If it's all cash, you can check this box. If you do the all cash, it makes it so that you can't click on the loan amounts or information. So I'm taking that off, and now you can see that I can click on here now. Okay, but I'm moving faster. Close of escrow, we want it to be either on a number of days after acceptance. So if we want to say like 30 days, or we can choose a specific date. So if you are heading into a bunch of holidays, like pretty soon we're going to be heading into Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of that, you can have it close on a specific date. I usually like to have things close on a Wednesday. And the reason for that is because if there are any delays, if anything gets caught up, then they still have a couple of days to actually close escrow. If you're closing on a Friday and there's like a 1-day delay, now you're waiting until the next business day, which is the soonest it's going to be Monday. Otherwise, it's going to be, if there's a holiday or something like that, it's going to be the next business day. So I always try and say, let's give us a little bit of extra time. Around the holidays, I might even say, let's close on a Monday to give us all that extra time, because you just never know. And I do feel like right now things have been being pushed longer. So you just have to be careful with that. Expiration of offer. This is saying that this offer is good for, the default is 3 calendar days. And I always just leave that out, that unless I want to put some pressure. So if I know that there are a bunch of other offers, or if I know that like my buyer wants to hurry up and move on and see something else, I'm going to say this offer is good for 24 hours and then it expires. Now, they can still come back after that time and say, hey, is your buyer still interested? If everybody signs it, then it's still good. It doesn't matter that it expires. But in general, basically, this is just telling them, hey, we want to move quick with this. So I usually leave it at 3 days unless there's something that we want to tell them. Your initial deposit, this is also known as your EMD deposit. This is typically about 3% of your offer. Oops, that's 30%. We don't want that. Now, 3% is the going rate because the seller legally cannot take more than 3%. So even if you said, here's 50%, we want to give it to you up front, legally the seller cannot take more than that. This is just basically a guarantee. It's just saying my buyer is serious. And so if you can put less than this. I used to say it's between 1% and 3%, but a lot of times you'll get pushback if you put 1%. So if you put less than 3%, you always have to have a reason for it. So sometimes I'll tell them like, hey, the reason is because they're selling their house and that's where their down payment is coming from or whatever. But in general, if they have it, I always say 3% because this tells the seller that you're serious. Then the loan amount. So if we're saying, let's say it's a 80% loan, it's a conventional loan. So the default is conventional. If it's FHA, VA, seller finance, something else, then you're going to want to click on these. But otherwise, the default is conventional loan. If we're saying that it is an 80% loan to value, that means they're getting a loan for $800,000 for $1 million property. $800,000. So what you'll notice is that down here, the balance of the down payment is the balance would be 20% is 200,000, but the balance of the down payment is 170. And that's because it took this 30,000 out of it already. So the 30,000 is a deposit. It goes toward the down payment. So then the balance of the down payment at close is going to be 170,000. Okay. I hope you guys are tracking with me. I know I'm going fast. If you wanted to put fixed rate, initial adjustable rate, not to exceed a certain percentage, this is another time just for your buyer to be able to pull out. So I usually leave this blank just because, remember we talked about those clean offers. This is something that if a listing agent sees that you have a rate not to exceed like 6.5%, well, we're in a market where it is exceeding 6.5%. Even if you put 7%, it's like, okay, well, it could do that. I usually leave this blank just because if rates go up and my buyer can't do it anyway, then it's going to be covered by their loan contingency. So they can pull out because of their loan contingency and still get their money back. So I'm not too worried about this. I feel like this muddies the water, so I just leave this all blank. Additional financing, we don't typically do this. This is if they're getting a second home loan or something like that. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of those. Occupancy type, the default is primary, or if you check it, it could be secondary or an investment property. If it's an investment property, there is a separate RPA that you can find out, the RIPA, which is essentially, it's basically the same, but it has some specific language to like tenants and all of that kind of thing. So I recommend using that if it's an investment property, but you can use this. All right, let's keep moving on. So seller credit to buyer. This is going to be if you're asking for like they want a $10,000 credit or a $5,000 credit. And then it says for closing costs. This is for the lender. The lender needs to see that it's for closing costs. And then you can say additional seller credit terms, but it doesn't include the buyer compensation. So this is where you would say the escalation clause. That's what it's called. Oh, my brain wasn't working. The escalation clause. You can say the buyer to pay like $5,000 higher than the next highest offer, the next highest verifiable bona fide offer up to a certain amount. And that's where you can put that in there. And so that they're seeing that all in the financing section. Then we're asking for the seller to pay the compensation. So remember, this is my template. So you want to make sure that this is checked off, that the seller is agreeing to pay, because in general, that's what we're asking for. In general, I'm going to ask for the higher amount and they can come back and counter me and give me a lower amount if they want, or they can just say, yep, 3% is good and leave it at that. But remember, I have to make sure that that's what my BRBC says, either 3% or higher. I can't have my BRBC say 2.5% and then be asking for 3% and they agree to that. I have to make my BRBC be at that or higher. Verification of cash. This is all the cash or the pre-approval, all of that. Remember, the default is attached to the offer. So you want to leave it at attached to the offer, because if you say you're going to get it within 3 days or 5 days after acceptance, that, remember, we want to write as clean of an offer as we can. This muddies it. So you want to have it ready and attach it to the offer. We want to have either a pre-approval or this fully underwritten pre-approval. This is the desktop underwriting, the DU. You can have that too that you submit. What we don't want is just a pre-qualification. That is not the standard. We don't like just a pre-qualification. We want to get them in a higher level, that pre-approval. The final verification of condition, this is that final walkthrough. It happens within 5 days of close of escrow. Assignment request. So this default is within 17 days. This is if you have like an investor who's coming in and says, I want to assign the property to somebody else, maybe a wholesaler or something like that. The default is that they can do that for 17 days. I always just leave this because, again, it muddies it otherwise. So the loan contingencies, I don't like to increase my contingency dates, but if it's like a VA loan that's going to be 45 days, I might want to increase that to like 21 days or something like that. If it's no contingencies, you mark it here. Appraisal, this is where we can do a lower time frame. We could do like 15 days, 14 days, 10 days, whatever you want. But remember that could trigger a rush that your buyers have to pay for. Now, read this. Appraisal contingency based upon appraised value at a minimum of the purchase price or another minimum. So if you've offered $1,000,001, but you're saying, hey, even if the appraisal comes in low, we're still willing to do it as long as it appraises at $1,000,000. So you want to put that $1,000,000 in there as the lowest amount. That's the lowest point that you will go to. If it appraises lower than that, then you're not willing to move forward with it. In general, again, I kind of leave this blank unless we're offering a way high amount. But even if we're offering a way high amount, usually we're waiving that appraisal contingency, because if it doesn't come in at that, then your people are wanting to get out of it maybe. So you have to have that conversation about the appraisal. Investigation of property, I always change this to 10 days. You can see this is on my template, so I change this to 10 days. All the rest of this is seller documents, all of that. Default is 17 days. I leave this blank. I don't touch it. I want to have a clean offer. Time of possession, the default is upon recordation. I'm going to leave that. That means as soon as it's recorded, they're able to take possession. Unless the seller is asking for time, if they're asking for extra days or anything like that, then I'm going to go with whatever the seller is asking for, as long as my buyer is okay with that. This is for seller occupied or vacant units. You're going to have to fill out a separate form for that if that's the case. Delivery of documents, I usually just leave this as is. Then let's move on to items included and excluded. So remember, this is my template. So for your template, you want to make sure that you have the basic things like stove. That is always gone with the property. Dishwasher, always sold with the property. Refrigerator, not always, but a lot of times my buyers want to keep the refrigerator. Washer, dryer, that's again something that you'll have to decide upon. Microwave, if it's a fixed, then it stays and you want to check that. If it's on the counter, then it usually goes. Security camera equipment, security equipment, usually I do mark this, so we'll mark it because it's my template. Smart home control devices, anything that is like wall mounted, I want to either keep or they can counter out, but I want to just have that be something that is there. Usually the video doorbells, like their ring, people take, so I don't usually say we're keeping that. Electric charging stations. Now, if they don't have this and you know they don't have that, then don't mark it, because that just looks like you're just like checking off all the boxes and then they have to counter it out and all of that. So you want to make it easy and don't mark this kind of stuff. Okay, now we're talking about allocation of costs. Who pays for what? And typically what I would say is the seller pays for things that are going to stay with the property, and the buyer pays for things that is going to help them make the decision about purchasing the property, if that makes sense. Like you can see, most of these things the seller is going to pay for. So natural hazard disclosure, I'm going to ask the seller to pay, and then I have this person who I usually use. So I have that already in my templates. Then we move down. Unless there are specific things that we want to do and have the seller pay for, we're going to mark that. But otherwise, we leave this blank. Now, in Ventura specifically, we have like the sewer lateral report that typically is paid by the seller, but that is also covered in government required point of sale inspections and reports, because as a point of sale, the sewer lateral is required. So I'm going to leave that there. Now, I do always say government required point of sale corrective or remedial actions. That means if there's something that they need to change based on a point of sale, I want the seller to pay that too. But if I'm the listing agent and a buyer writes that in, I always go back and I counter that and I say it's negotiable. So I don't want to say, yes, the seller's agreeing to that. I want to say it'll be renegotiated at the time that it's like we find out what it is. Escrow fees, always each to pay their own. Title, the seller. And usually I do leave this as choice of seller, just because I want the seller to choose. If they tell me exactly who it is, then I'll write it in. If they don't have an option, then I'll write in my preferred escrow and title people. And then a lot of this stuff, like the transfer fees, the seller usually always pays for that. HOA fees, it's like you can't change this. This is seller, and then the certification fee is always the buyer. If there is an HOA, you want to mark this of who's going to pay for that. Usually I still ask the seller to pay for that, and then we see what ends up happening. And then private transfer fees is always going to be the seller unless you want to check it and change it. So sometimes people do put in like termites and stuff like that. In general, you do not want to put anything that the lender is going to see in this RPA, because the lender is going to see this and they don't want to see that there are termites, that they know there are termites. They want to have that like outside of the loan process. And sometimes what they might do is they might either make you do a whole new RPA, or they will have you write up an addendum saying, hey, that's removed, but then separately you can be like, no, we still have a deal on that. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to put termite stuff in the RPA. I did just have an instance with another agent that they were saying that the agent put it in, and I was saying, well, is it an FHA or VA? Because maybe they're just telling you that we know that because it's an FHA or VA, it's going to have to be fixed, because termite, like safety hazards have to be fixed according to VA and FHA loans. But who pays for that is negotiable. So if the buyer in the beginning is saying, hey, we need this to be paid by the seller, then the seller is going to understand that and know it needs to be paid for by the seller. So it's okay to write it in, but it's not typical, and I don't recommend it. Then we have the home warranty stuff. I always just say it's upgraded. The seller usually pays up to $750. I have my person, if it's an if it's an investor, usually they choose to waive it. But most of the time, even if they're like, no, I want to waive it, we still ask for it, because even when it was like a super strong seller's market, sellers were still usually paying for this, because it's also kind of like a warranty for them it's like a protection for them to help them not like have to worry about anything coming back on them. Then the rest of this is, different types of addendas if you want to add those in. And then remember, the rest of this is just an explanation of what's above. So we have here for Q12, the explanation paragraph is 11L2 for the HOA fees. So if we go to 11, where's 11? 11, we're almost there. Didn't it say L? Yeah. 11L, we're not there yet. L2. So here's the explanation about that. So all of this is explanation. Make sure to read through all of this, understand it. Let me know if you have any questions, because we want to make sure that this is all understood. And then we have here the buyer's signatures, the acceptance, and now the seller can choose to accept it. They can accept it as is by just signing it, or they can say, we're going to give you a a counter offer, or we want to use this as a backup offer. So you have that option too. Then we have, let's see, your information. And then remember, we need the seller's information, which if you put it up from the MLS Connect, it'll put this in automatically. You don't have to worry about that. And then we are done. The rest of this is more of that bundle. So remember, you're sending this whole bundle in with you. And that is the end of that. Grab your free resource at the link below. It's packed with tools to help you get more business. Then mark your calendar for Tuesdays at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our live trainings are the only place to get the full scoop and your questions answered on the spot. I'll see you live.